Welcome to the Telling of Story podcast. I'm your host, storyteller Jules, and along with my guests, it's my endeavour to explore the art and science of storytelling to attract, engage, and retain a business audience, and to unpack why it works for some and not for the many that try. Listen in as Boris talks about longevity and reinventing yourself.
So I was having lunch in Los Angeles with Howie and his road manager at the time, and I actually was complaining. I could have been a regular, but they canceled the show. Two words that came out of Howie, which sort of were inspirational for me. Everything ends. Now, this is before shows like Deal or No Deal, America's Got Talent, all of the other stuff that he has done. But he basically told me in those words, you have to keep reinventing yourself.
In this episode, I have the pleasure of talking with Boris Cherniak. Boris is a comedy hypnotist, global keynote speaker, and author of You Can Do Anything. His performance blends hilarious interactive entertainment with team building while addressing mental health. Boris has appeared on Maury, the Robert Irvine Show, the Howie Mandel Show, the Vegas Show, Comics, the Casino, and Just for Laughs Festival and Boston Comedy Festival. He has headlined on the Las Vegas Strip, entertained troops in Afghanistan and Kuwait, and empowered women at a leadership conference in Dubai. Boris has presented at TEDx and awarded titles of Global Leader, Global Guru, and Entertainer of the Year repeatedly. The passion for which Boris takes the stage is engaging and contagious, while the impact is unforgettable. Boris, welcome to the show.
Jules, it's a pleasure, absolute pleasure to be here on something that gets people to talk about stuff and be a great storyteller.
Boris, take me all the way back. You originally studied computer programming and then psychology. How, why, and when did you make the transition into entertainment and obviously in particular hypnosis?
Well, specifically earlier on, I was always a kid that thrived in front of a crowd. So whenever there was a crowd, I would be able to entertain them with almost nothing. And as I was growing up, I found a little book while taking a course at one of the universities, and the book was called The Search for Bridie Murphy. It's not a really glamorous start, but it got me interested in the subject of hypnosis. But I was studying computer programming and analysis, and over the period of learning, and I ended up liking the subject. So what I did is, while I was taking the course and I got interested in the subject, I read pretty well everything on the floor, on the psychology floor in that university, and that's where that whole thing started. But as a teenager, this is going way back when, I played around at parties. So friends would ask me, oh, that was fun the last time, let's do this again. And while studying computer programming, I kind of combined both because the mind is a computer that you can program and reprogram at the same time. So once you figure out that there's a way to take whatever society brings you up with and change it so you can actually reprogram your own future, your own beliefs, and take that further. So set yourself a goal and that goal becomes a reality. It did for me. I had a little hobby that became a career. So this is what I do now.
Fabulous. And you've clearly been doing it for quite a long time now. But for the people out there and for me too, what actually is hypnosis and how does it work? I've always been curious.
Well, hypnosis basically is the ability. We all slip in and out of trance daily. Studies show that you slip in and out of trance about 14 times a day, whether it's daydreaming or concentrating on something so intently that you block everything else out. So hypnosis is the ability of somebody to guide you through a process and get you from point A to point B where they can mold your reality. And that reality can be molded instantly, like on a stage. This is what I do a lot of times, or long term, whether you want to improve your confidence or you want to quit smoking, stop overeating. So all of those encompass the same area of expertise where hypnosis is just a conduit, a way to get to a specific point where your mind is suggestible. So once you're suggestible, you're able to rewrite your own programming. So just like take Rolodex and taking the cards out and putting something new in that is worthwhile. Like during the pandemic, I dealt a lot with mental health, specifically where I created a little thing for the corporate audiences called Mental Health Toolbox, where I literally gave people a reason to feel positive, feel resilient when the news was telling you the world just fell apart and you're part of it. I mean, well, I'm telling them the opposite, but here's how you can reprogram that mindset. So it's changing mindsets, changing attitudes, and giving people a reason to be positive and feel resilient.
I guess I understand the concept of training the brain sort of for long-term change, when you're trying to, as you say, break an addiction or get over a fear or just improve your mental health. I sort of understand that concept, but how do you make, I watched quite a few of your videos, but how is it possible that fairly quickly you can get somebody to act like a chicken or change their name on stage and, be adamant that that's their name, or can't say the word, the number 6, which seems to come up. Like, how is that possible that you can just totally shut off somebody in such a quick moment in time and then turn them back on at will?
You have just named a few of my signature routines where I'm able to show people literally on the spot how the mind can be programmed instantly. And it's actually not that instant. If you watch on the stage, everything happens in front of your eyes, but the actual hypnosis process takes about 10 minutes. It's not very long, but it's a matter of using language. And if you've heard the term NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, that I'm basically a wordsmith that is able to get the programming started where I block out your reality. And you don't change as a hypnotized person. However, what changes is the reality that I have created. And I get people to react to whatever that might be. And we all have that. Whether you've walked around with glasses on the top of your head looking for them all over the house, but guess what? They were all always sitting on top of your head, yet you were completely unaware of it. So that's exactly what happens. I change the way your critical thinking works and go directly to the unconscious. There's basically two minds. I will oversimplify that for you. There's the conscious mind, things that you're aware of, you know what you're doing, and things that you're not aware, and it's still working all by itself. So things like you're still blinking, you're breathing, all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes, that's always there whether you like it or not. So I go directly to the subconscious, which takes everything blindly. The conscious is like a guard at the door saying, oh, this makes sense and this does not. And once it passes through, all a hypnotist really does when you watch a stage show is literally confuse the conscious mind, which once you bypass that, everything becomes reality, no matter how silly it might sound. And that's what I create on stage, because my job is to recognize different little signs that people exhibit and take it further and exaggerate. And it's theatrics as well. So I'll give you a perfect example about theatrics. When I have people hallucinate and show them that there's a bird on my finger, I will only ask one person on stage what the bird looks like. Why? Because they're all seeing a different bird. So they will describe a different bird and start fighting amongst one another that, no, it's not green, it's yellow. Yes, there's comedy in that, but I'm trying to keep the show moving rather than having people stopping me. So that's where that comes in. So there is theatrics involved in a hypnosis stage show. However, the therapeutic benefits way outweigh something that you get a chance to see on stage.
You mentioned that we go into a trance, several times a day. And it's also something that I talk about when we talk about storytelling, is that the mind is designed to obviously conserve energy because it is pretty busy, right? It's keeping us alive. It's thinking about stuff consciously and subconsciously, and we can't possibly react to absolutely everything that's going on 24 hours a day. It would be far too exhausting. So the mind tends to tune everything out. Is there anything that we can learn from hypnosis, perhaps, or the wordsmithing that you mentioned, whereby, as far as storytelling is concerned, the idea behind storytelling is that you're able to grab somebody's attention and then keep somebody's attention.
Captivate them, exactly. And that's just what I do. I captivate an audience and I tell a story. Everything that happens, at least on my stage, I can't talk for anybody else, but I try as hard as possible to interweave a storyline into everything that's going on. So when you're watching, it's not just a bunch of disjointed skits or routines, if you like. What you're seeing is a story evolving right in front of your eyes. And the story is so compelling that the audience forgets that after an hour and a half, 2 hours, oh my goodness, how much time went by. And it's one of the regular things in my performance where people don't realize how long it was because they were so engrossed in everything that was happening that it ends up being time flying by to the point where, oh, wow, how much time passed by? Really, an hour and a half. How is that possible? And that's what I try to do, because storytelling, and your podcast is literally all about storytelling. That's one of the most amazing things you can do, is engross people in something. The way my performance works, here's a funny routine, but here's what you've learned from it. So I want people to have more questions after they've seen me on stage than when they came in. And that to me is more exciting, that they find out a little bit more about how their mind works and what they can do with their mind, rather than just take things for granted. A perfect example, news is always negative. Why? Because you're drawn to, how is that possible? How can that be? Yet the feel-good story gets buried somewhere at the end of the news cycle, rather than leading with the front. There's an old adage, if it bleeds, it leads, in the media, where if it's gruesome, if it's horrible, then it's got to be the front story, and people will be happy to identify, oh, I'm so happy and glad that this is not me. Because that's what TV screen is all about. They try to get you to see and identify with somebody else. That's why a lot of it right now is diversifying, recognizing people who are just like you on a TV screen or on a movie screen, right? And I completely agree with that. Until recently, that wasn't the case, and people felt left out. So now that story is being told just for them. So same sort of storyline applies.
So you're clearly a master at it. To keep engage an entire audience for an hour and a half is no mean feat. So congratulations and well done, and years of practice.
Thank you.
Right, so
I'll tell you exactly, and this is a passion. It's like a symphony orchestra. Think of it that way. Everything has a purpose. Every word has a purpose. Every gesture on stage has a purpose of leading something somewhere else or leading into another routine. Every tiny little detail, the laughter that comes from the audience. When they get too tired of laughing, I'll give them a little routine that will let them rest and bring something even bigger to get them on a higher plateau of that laughter. And it just keeps growing. And the laughter comes in different beats. So it's almost like, think of me as a hypnotist being a director of events rather than the guy with an incredible talent. I don't have a talent. I just learned how to hypnotize. All I do is I push it in a specific direction and tell that story. And just like your podcast, it's all about telling stories. It's all about getting the audience so engrossed in the story that nothing else matters for that moment, and get them to forget anything that could ever have happened in their lives at that point.
You're not just a hypnotist there, clearly. You're a mind reader as well, because that was my exact question. How much of it is learned and practiced and scripted in your act, and how much of it do you actually take from the audience and shift depending on what's going on? How much feedback do you need to then go to the next place? Or is it pretty specific about the routine?
Every day. I have a skeleton of what I intend to do for every performance. Yet that changes on the fly because the audience gives me a specific feedback. And I even have little test routines to see how far you can push them. If they're ready to jump off a cliff with me, or don't you dare come closer to that cliff. So I will use little test wording, and depending on the response, I'm trying to deliver what fits that, what its demographic, fits that mold of an audience as a whole, because people don't act the same way as when they're together as a mob mentality, right? It's different when you're dealing with just one person in comparison to a lot. And the audiences range, I don't know, for me, they range anywhere from about 100 people to the most I've ever done was probably about 15,000. So ranging from one to the next, you have to adapt, and everything has to be fairly universal, where even the material will apply to the moment, especially with these days, the way things are. You cannot offend, or if you offend, you better offend all the way. That's the way I feel about it. But it has to be inclusive, where you involve the audience, where the material is within their grasp and they can take something out of it, especially in keynote addresses. They need the information to take home with them. that they can use in their lives. And I've been able to combine that part of it. See, I come from really meager beginnings where all I ever wanted to do was succeed. So when you strive for bigger and better, and there's nothing that could get in the way, because my parents are immigrants that traveled the world until they found a better place for their kids. So for me, this is another start where how can I do the same thing for my kids? And the ball keeps rolling, but you are delivering the same sort of thing. So the need, the want, the passion has to be there. And that's why I'm here. I'm delivering the same passion, hopefully, to your audience that takes me onto a stage every day, every night, wherever I'm performing. And sometimes it takes me longer to get to the show than the actual show itself. So that's the exciting part. You have to constantly be driven and be pushing that ball forward rather than being stagnant. I'll tell you a quick story. You're familiar with Howie Mandel, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. He's one of the judges on America's Got Talent. Yep. So if you get a chance to see that. So I appeared many years ago on Howie Mandel Show, and what I did came out so well that they brought me back a month later, which is very exciting for any performer. Yeah. You do well and somebody likes it. And I would have been irregular on the show, except 2 months later, they canceled the show.
Shame.
Which is unfortunate. So I was having lunch in Los Angeles with Howie and his road manager at the time, and I actually was complaining. I could have been a regular, but they canceled the show. 2 words that came out of Howie, which sort of were inspirational for me. Everything ends. Now, this is before shows like Deal or No Deal, America's Got Talent, all of the other stuff that he has done. But he basically told me in those words, you have to keep reinventing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And same with the pandemic that came around. I'm sure it stopped enough lives out there. And for me personally, I was doing 300 shows a year, and then it went to 0 overnight.
Wow.
So at that point in time, you have to constantly keep changing, keep finding what drives things forward for you. And that's exactly what I'm trying to relate, hopefully, to your audience, where you have to keep reinventing yourself. You have to keep finding something that excites you, something, my job, it could be mundane, doing the same thing in front of an audience night after night, but I keep writing. I keep doing more exciting stuff, even on a stage. Like right now, some of the material that I've been writing includes TikTok.
Right.
So I find whatever's common in the world today and put it right on a stage where it keeps it exciting and new and fun for me. That's the storyline as far as I'm concerned. The storyline keeps changing, and your job is to tell that story. When the story is interwoven into other stuff, your life becomes exciting. If you work all day, come back home, watch TV, and go to sleep every day, it becomes mundane.
I was going to ask you, does it ever get old? But you've just answered that question, right? Keep reinventing, keep changing.
I actually said a long time ago, when it stops being fun, I get out.
Yeah.
I'm selling it, so it hasn't stopped being fun. It's exciting every time. One of the greatest things, I got this phone call today. It was so much fun the last time, we'd like to rebook you. Yeah, right. So when you get that type of a phone call, it just makes a big deal. And it's not about money. It's not about anything else. I did something right that people remembered me. So put your mark on other people's lives, and that's the art of storytelling. Your life matters. It matters to the people around you, and they will remember you. At this point in time, doing this long enough, this is 41 years in, where I now get a chance to meet people's kids.
Yes.
Different performance and different events who remember me. You'll get one of these, hi, this is one of mine. Oh, sir, how are you? So to me, that's rather exciting.
Yeah. Inspiring the next generation. Congrats. So Boris, take me back to when you were just talking about sort of keynote speaking and using the information from the audience in order to keep the conversation going. What can we learn? Business has to do that all the time, right? They might be in front of their customer, or they might be in front of a prospect where they're actually trying to persuade. And I talk about ethical persuasion. We're not trying to get them to do something that they don't want to do, which is perhaps a little bit of your routine, is where they're doing something, unwillingly. So we're not talking about.
You have no idea how many times I hear that. Can you make somebody to do this?
Do this, yeah. Help me sell this, irrelevant of whether they want to or not, right? So I'll talk about ethical persuasion.
But you know what? Yeah, it's done all the time, ethically and non-ethically.
Right.
I don't know why, but half-naked girls do not equal women. With women having a good time does not equal beer. And that's how things are presented to us mostly. So once you know how it works, you can read through commercials. You can read through when somebody's doing stuff. And you can also read through somebody being genuine.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer telling people exactly how it is, where sometimes truth may hurt, and other times it'll get you more sales, more friends, more whatever it is that you're looking for, just because you lay your cards on the table. Just what's happening right now, things are getting a little bit more expensive.
Yep.
Just because the pandemic took the availability and jobs and all of that stuff away. Yet people who are truthful, I do this in my job. It costs me more in flights. I need to ask a little bit more money, but here's the price. I'm not giving you any different. I have to ask for more money in order for me to get paid. So when people are truthful about it, it becomes okay. It becomes absolutely fine with somebody laying out a little bit more money, but they're not being cheated. And when you feel like you're cheated, you will spend more money not to get cheated rather than saving $1 and then realizing, oh, you have not paid the right price anyway. So when people are honest, and honesty is the best policy, it just drives things forward all by itself. And same with results coming back. I created living on just letting people look. This is my presentation. And what I did, I combined entertainment with inspiration. Right? But it comes directly from my life. Everything that I do, everything I show, it comes straight out of my life where I was able to notice things that other people may not have and put it on stage while telling that story. And I will take a few seconds just tagging a funny routine that you have just seen and tell people how that relates to it. I have a really funny routine in my performance where I tell people that cocktail napkins are $100 bills. So little things that you put underneath your drink.
Yep.
So $100 bills. And every time that they do something really nice, I pay them off and give them a little bit of as far as they think is money. Nice. Which is okay. It's nice and wonderful. So I repeated that routine when I was filming the TV show, The Vegas Show. Two guys in Las Vegas who bought the casino called the Golden Nugget. It was a reality show. So what I did, that similar routine was done on that show, yet I sent the guy gambling with cocktail napkins thinking they're $100 bills. Mm-hmm. With a camera behind. So that's the way my brain works. I find funny and stuff that's normally not funny. Then what you take out of it is the value of that cocktail napkin is a perceived value. $100 doesn't really mean anything to a person whatsoever, whether it's $100 or a cocktail napkin. But at that point in time, that cocktail napkin equals $100 in their mind. So that's what I tried to show you. What motivation is there? Where is it equal to a piece of paper or a monetary note? So that's how I find my material, and I find a way to deliver something inspirational. So do people do stuff for money, or do they do it just because they see value in it?
Right. I talk about value a lot.
You realize that.
Yeah, I talk about value a lot when we're sort of talking about persuasive communication. You know, somebody will continue to follow and listen if they assume that the value is high enough for them. So whatever drives them typically, which is a combination of things, not just the physical value of an item, but the perceived value of an item, which will depend on the situation they're in, right? So I also talk a lot about persuasive communication being a journey. You can't take somebody to the end of a story and expect them to join you there. You have to start at the beginning of the story and allow them to come and follow you on that journey and make those decisions cognitively themselves so that they're at the same place when you finally come to the point of saying, hey, would you like to do business with us? Then they've actually understood exactly where you've come from, why you're doing it, what's in it for them, what the value is, and therefore are able to make a conscious decision about that. So how much do you agree, disagree that a storyline does have a beginning, middle, and end, and that you have to actually help people through that process. So when you're on stage, for example, and you're trying to persuade them to do something, you don't just start at the end of the process. There is a process behind it, right?
Absolutely. You're quite right about it. The way my stage stuff works, I build on it. You start small and you let people process you, just like I was talking about how far you can push them. That's also how much information can you provide them with. If people are overwhelmed, they're just shutting off, they're shutting down, and no more information is being processed. So once you give them a little bit at a time and you grow on top of that, then it becomes a real eye opener where they're absorbing and they can also extrapolate more than you're told. I'm a big proponent of communication. Just like when you walk into a restaurant and you're just standing there without anybody looking at you or saying anything, it's like, okay, when am I next? I don't know. Except when somebody, I'll be right with you. I'm just dealing with these people right over here. It'll be maybe 2 minutes at the most. I'll be right with you. Right. A little tiny thing that's just told them the story and also gave them the information that yes, you are important and you're worthwhile. So even in customer service, that completely applies. And a lot of times everything from the sales work, and I deal a lot with corporate events where everybody from a salesperson to, just a person in the back that doesn't even get a chance to deal with people. But salesperson knows little things. If you ever go to buy a car, they're well trained to just call you by name. So all of a sudden, if I say, Jules, let me tell you about this, Jules, and I repeat it 5 times, guess what? You feel like, oh, this guy knows me all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. It might be fake. It might be put on, but it shows that the person talking to you cares. Mm. So if they cared enough to remember your name, they must care about the product that they sell. So it equates to everything down the line, just like a domino effect.
When you're working with an audience, is there a difference for you when it's a very small audience? So if there's only 2 or 3 people that you're dealing with versus 10 versus 100 versus 10,000? Is there a difference in your performance?
Yes, absolutely. I'll tell you this. For me, large audiences are very easy.
Right.
Why? Because they all act as one. First of all, large audiences, you can take your time and they'll give you the feedback, meaning even the laughter ripples all the way through and the sound comes back at you two seconds later. So if you're laughing over here in front of me, I can hear that instantly. With an audience, because the sound travels slowly, in a large audience, you will hear it back. So you actually have to work slower.
Right.
And usually they're bigger stages. You have to walk slower.
Interesting.
Right. Different thing. A small audience, and these days even with the lights, but a small audience, I can look them all in the eye. But this is where I started. I started out as a teenager playing around at household parties, where even the routines that I do today, a few of them had the beginning in some of those parties where I was looking to be different, and I was more about getting ahead and finding out about something that I knew nothing about. That was my way of learning. I actually learned as a lay hypnotist initially and relearned it going through I took a course in college, and my background is Seneca College, University of Toronto, and Ryerson, University of Toronto, Seneca, and York University. I'm just in the middle of dealing with a whole bunch of the university orientations. That's why a lot of them are coming right in front of me. So when I relearned, I took a little course called The Study of Self that was really interesting. And that started me on the process of, what do you mean we are shaped by society? How can society shape you? Well, from the moment that you were born, everything that you do has been put in front of you. For example, we're supposed to get married between 20 and 30 years, then have babies, right? That's the process that people expect. And then if that's not what you're looking for, then you don't belong. So how is it possible that I don't belong? So people constantly try to find themselves, justify themselves to the world. Yet once you understand it, then you can reprogram your own way of thinking that's not what I'm looking for. I have a different alley that I want to take, the different path. So to me, it became very important dealing with that course. And it was also dealing with Jungian psychology, where it's not the same as Freudian, where your mother is responsible for everything. Find your own path and your own way of life. So I play that game and try and separate the way your brain works versus the way society works. That's why the background, coming back to the start of this conversation, the brain can be reprogrammed to feel the way you want to feel.
Mm. It's a fabulous segue, Boris, and thank you for your chat today. I've really enjoyed it. But you talked a bit about, you've done some recent work in particular around mental health through the pandemic, as an example. And in today's world, there's a lot going on. We've just come through a pandemic. People are still sort of recovering from that. Cost of living is incredibly high. There's some unsettling, political world stuff going on. There's wars happening. There's all sorts of pressures, almost no matter what age group you sort of sit in. So as a bit of a parting, few words of wisdom, is there anything you can give the audience to just help them on that sort of mental health journey and just give them something to help them?
Oh, absolutely. Well, one thing that I taught people for a little while is guided meditation. And you can do that yourself, or you can do that with the help of others, where you take a few minutes out of the day to relax and basically clear your head. And most of us are bombarded with information, and information can be overwhelming. So once you literally take a few minutes, and I deal with relaxation, where just relax your body from your head all the way down to your toes, and you'd be surprised how well that does. Also, sleep, it's not how long you sleep, it's how well you sleep. So take the time to make sure that you get great sleep, because the brain relaxes and empties itself of all of the stuff that gets you with stress. And stress is a perceived notion of not being in control. So once you are regaining that control, everything changes. To me, it has been literally find that purpose, find the positivity, because there's two ways of looking at stuff. You can either find the negative side, just like watching the news. Everything is horrible. How is that possible? The world fell apart. I don't know if I should be going on. Or, yes, it might be that bad, or they can always get better, and I can make things better. And what can I do to make it better just for me? And take things a different way. Just like you might be watching the news, this got devastated by a hurricane, a fire, or whatever else that might be, but they can rebuild. They can move forward and find bigger, better stuff. Whatever was holding them back, right now, there's nothing holding them back. So find that positivity within you. I live by that positivity. My background, I live by 4 simple words. You can do anything. That's my message to the world. I can't say that enough, because when people said you can't, I did. And once you're able to find that within you and push forward, nothing should be stopping you ever. And if it does, then it's the end. So if it's not done, it's not the end.
And everything ends, right? So including this podcast.
Then you have to keep reinventing yourself so that there's no end in sight.
Fabulous. Boris, thank you so much for joining me. Where can the audience find out a little bit more about you?
Jules, they can find me on the internet. There's a ton of stuff. If you just Google Boris Hypnotist, or just in any search engine, find stuff. I have a website, incredibleBoris.com. And Incredible is almost a little thing that came around by a mistake. Everybody, when I started, just kept adding things to it. I was incredible, Boris. I was stupendous, amazing, you name it. Any adjective that would describe something supernatural or outrageous, I was that. So incredibleBoris.com is the easiest way to find me. And I also have a little book out there called You Can Do Anything. It's available on Audible, which actually during the pandemic, I got a chance to narrate myself, and as a paperback. So incredibleBoris.com. All of the links are on there.
Boris, you've been incredible. Thank you.
You're awesome, Jules. Nice talking to you.
There were so many nuggets Boris shared. My favorite? Getting your audience so engaged in your performance that nothing else matters in that moment. Much love. Chat soon.